In the summer of 1923, spectators at the French Grand Prix in Tours weren't prepared for what rolled onto the grid. They came for roaring engines, daring drivers, and maybe a little drama. What they got was a machine so strange it looked like it had escaped from a naval shipyard. Short, squat, with smooth, rounded aluminum sides and barely any exposed mechanicals, it didn't look like a racing car at all. It looked like a torpedo on wheels, a bullet with fenders, a tank, and that's exactly what they nicknamed it. The Bugatti Type 32, the tank. Underneath that bizarre bodywork was a 2.0-litre straight-8 engine, producing around 90 horsepower with a top speed near 120 miles per hour. For 1923, that was terrifyingly quick. Most cars at the time struggled past 70 without rattling themselves apart. But behind this daring design was a story of ambition, risk, and one costly flaw that would haunt Bugatti's racing program for years. This wasn't just a car. It was a rolling experiment in aerodynamic theory, and it came with a twist ending Ettore Bugatti himself probably didn't see coming. Before we peel back those aluminum panels and expose the secrets hiding inside, smash that subscribe button like you're slamming the gear stick into top speed. But unlike a gearbox, the button won't cost you thousands to replace, because in the next few minutes, we're going to see why the Type 32 shocked the racing world, why it failed, and why, despite its failure, it might be one of the most important cars Bugatti ever built. And wait until you hear what happened to the only survivor. To understand the Type 32's radical form, we need to rewind to the early 1920s. Motorsport was a chaotic laboratory. Designs varied wildly, safety was, let's just say, optional, and rules were loose enough that almost anything could line up on race day if it had four wheels. Bugatti had tasted victory with the Type 30, but the 1923 French Grand Prix at Tours presented a unique challenge. The course was essentially a high-speed triangle, long straights linked by sweeping corners. This wasn't a track for slow, heavy cars with brick-like aerodynamics. Ettore Bugatti saw his chance to leap ahead. He'd been watching developments in aviation since the First World War, where streamlined fuselages and air-slipping designs were proving their worth. Planes were cutting through the skies with smooth, flowing shapes, while most cars were still big, boxy, and aerodynamically clumsy. The plan was bold: build a car as aerodynamic as an aircraft wing. That's why the Type 32's chassis was shortened to just 2 meters, about 6 or 7, between axles, ridiculously short for a Grand Prix machine, and clothed in a single smooth aluminum shell, with cutouts only for the wheels. This wasn't just for looks. The bodywork reduced the frontal area and, in theory, lowered drag significantly. The engine was Bugatti's proven 1991cc straight-8 with a single overhead camshaft and 3 valves per cylinder. A compact, high-revving unit in those days, it sat low and tight within the chassis, with independent front suspension helping it keep contact on those long Tours straights. On paper, it was a weapon, but the unusual proportions hid a flaw that would reveal itself in the most public way possible. A flaw you could see just from looking at the car standing still, if you knew what to look for. And the reason Ettore took such a big risk? That's where things get even more interesting. Ettore Bugatti was not a man to play it safe. He was as much an artist as an engineer, and in the 1920s your reputation was built as much on spectacle as it was on silverware. A radical design guaranteed attention. Grand Prix racing then was a marketing battlefield. Winning made headlines, but so did shocking people. Ettore's thinking was clear. If the Type 32's aerodynamic shell gave him a top-end speed advantage on Tours' long straights, the car could outrun the competition, even if it wasn't perfect in the corners. There was one small snag. Aerodynamics in 1923 was still half science, half guesswork. Wind tunnels were rare, data was primitive, and much of the design work came down to intuition and trial and error. The short wheelbase, great for compactness, made the Type 32 twitchy at high speed. At the same time, the smooth aluminum shell trapped heat inside the cockpit, turning it into a sauna. Drivers were fighting both the car and their own discomfort. Still, Ettore pressed on. The publicity potential was too good to pass up. This was a car that would stand out in every photograph that journalists couldn't stop talking about. A car from another planet, one paper said, but when the flag dropped at Tours, theory met reality, and reality had a nasty bite. Race day, Tours, July 1923. 4 Type 32S lined up alongside rivals from Fiat, Sunbeam and others. The Bugattis looked like futuristic bullets among old-fashioned open-wheeled cars. The start was strong. The Type 32S shot down the straights with the speed Ettore had promised. But the first set of corners told a different story. The short wheelbase made the car nervous, darty and unpredictable. Worse, the enclosed bodywork trapped engine heat. Drivers were baking inside, their concentration slipping with every lap. Braking into corners felt vague, with the enclosed front fenders limiting feedback. By lap 3, it was clear the gamble wasn't working. The Type 32 could blast down the straights, but it lost so much time in the corners that any advantage evaporated. Mechanical strain began taking its toll too, a reminder that this was still a prototype. In the end, only one of the 4 finished in 3rd place. Respectable but far from the victory Ettore wanted. And for a car that had promised so much, it was a public disappointment. Yet hidden in the Type 32's mechanicals was a decision so unusual that historians still debate why Ettore used it. Unlike most Grand Prix cars of its day, the Type 32 used a compact 4-speed gearbox mounted unusually close to the engine, in part to keep the whole package short and aerodynamic. This tight packaging improved airflow, but made servicing and cooling more difficult. Drivers reported the gear linkage heating up over long stints, making shifts tricky and painful. Why would Ettore risk this? Many believe the Type 32 was more than a race car. It was a rolling laboratory. Lessons learned from this gearbox layout would later feed directly into the legendary Type 35. It's a classic Bugatti move. Take a short-term hit for long-term gain. The Type 32's failure wasn't the end. It was the blueprint for the most successful race car of the era. But the real stroke of genius was in the bodywork, decades ahead of its time. In 1923, most racing cars ignored aerodynamics entirely. Bugatti didn't. The Type 32's aluminum shell integrated the fenders into the body, something that wouldn't become common until the 1950s. It was incredibly low for its day, with minimal drag on the straights. The problem was downforce, or rather, the lack of it. In 1923, designers didn't yet understand that to go faster through corners, you needed the air to push the car into the road. Still, this thinking laid the groundwork for future designs. Bugatti's later racers would blend aerodynamics with mechanical grip more successfully, creating machines like the Type 35 that dominated for years. And while the Type 32's career was brief, one example would go on to have a second life. Only 4 Type 32S were built. 3 vanished into history. One survives today in the Cité de l'Automobile Museum in Mulhouse, France. In person, it's tiny, almost comically so, but the craftsmanship is pure Bugatti, riveted panels, elegant curves, and a cockpit more like a WI fighter plane than a car. Modern historians see it not as a flop, but as a critical stepping stone. Without the Type 32's lessons, good and bad, the Type 35 might never have been as successful. The tank proved that pushing boundaries is risky, but also necessary. The 1923 Bugatti Type 32 didn't win the French Grand Prix. It didn't dominate its era. But it did something arguably more important. It dared to be different. It was a car built on ambition, shaped by the winds of aviation and doomed by the limits of its time. And yet it shaped the future of Bugatti in ways no one could have predicted. Today it stands as a reminder that in racing, as in life, you learn as much from failure as from victory. Sometimes the cars we remember most aren't the winners, but the ones bold enough to change the game.